Welcome to the Athlete Climate Academy, where we talk with athletes, scientists, and communicators about the critical conversations that we need to have about the climate crisis. And we get asked a lot about the actions that we can take as athletes, and an action at the top of that list is always advocacy. So today we're excited to be joined by Calum Macintyre, an athlete super committed to environmental advocacy. Calum's not just an amazing all-round winter athlete and snowboarder, but also pushing for urgent climate action within our communities. With a focus on sustainability and collective responsibility, he's here to share some insights on how we can all contribute to the movement and be an athlete advocate. Calum, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you for sure. So can you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to become an athlete and then on to become an athlete advocate?
Yeah, it's a bit funny for me. I don't really feel like I'm like an actual athlete. I feel like I'm snowboarding a lot in the mountains with other athletes. But yeah, I do a lot of snowboarding in the winter. And I basically got into it when I started actually coming to Norway when I was 2 or 3 with my parents. I live here now full time. And obviously started off skiing. And then I think when I was 8, I started snowboarding. And then, just basically, I got really, really into it. And then when I was 18, did some ski seasons and things like that. And it was around the time I did a ski season in like Morzine or somewhere. And I just remember always having this feeling like I really wanted to get out of the lift and kind of go, further into the mountains. And then I got home and cut an old board in half and basically started splitboarding. And then once I started splitboarding, my eyes were like completely open to what could be done sort of in the mountains with this new tool. And then, I moved to Norway in 2016 and I actually moved here to study. I did a master's in climate change policy. And luckily I found a university that was in a ski town. So I was very, very lucky. And I've done lots and lots of things in the mountains in Norway since then.
It seems that, and I often talk about this in terms of the age-old adage of jack of all trades, master of none, and how that is, it's just the first part of the actual quote that is, oftentimes better than a master of one, a master of none. So the having lots of different things in your tool belt to use, and it's the intersectionality between different skills that I think is really interesting. It seems that all of the things that you enjoy and want to put your mind to come together in a ski town in Norway where you can snowboard and study climate policy. It just does seem that like all those things fit together perfectly for you.
Yeah, I definitely identify quite a lot with that that quote, jack of all trades, master of none. But I do think in some ways it's really it's important also to figure out those how different things are connected. And especially when it comes to like snowboarding and outdoor sports and the climate crisis, it's really, really important to kind of figure out the different ways that you can interweave topics and the ways you're working.
Yeah. It's climate change is the most complex problem and issue we've ever tried to deal with as humankind, and there's no way to be a master of one when studying climate issues because every single thing influences another thing, and it's one of the reasons it's such a complicated topic, for sure. But it means that we have to at least be aware of other things when we're trying to, even climate policy. If we're trying to put something through and get it greenlit, you have to be aware of how it impacts other policies, but then also other people as well. So what that is obviously quite a good reason to start weaving that then into your athletic career as a snowboarder. But what I see from your Instagram and your social media feeds is that the mix of the two has started, they've started to spill over into each other, and you've been talking more with the outdoor community and with the athletes around about how they can also become more involved in that environmental advocacy work too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely kind of before I sort of struggled to see how I could combine the two, and then I mean I started working with like POW in Norway when I first kind of got here in 2016, and I would go around and do talks to the ski community about climate policy and this kind of thing. But I have to say I did sort of struggle to really understand uh, how to properly connect the two in a way that for me, felt that was really making a change or like really being impactful. And it was only when I think nowadays, like I'm much more into sort of direct action, and I've definitely realized that this is a bit of a missing or a dark spot maybe in the outdoor community. I've been trying to communicate a lot on Instagram, for example, like the repression that activists are facing around Europe, specifically to the outdoor community, because I just feel like it's very easy for people to like ignore this kind of stuff and just feel that it's happening to people that they don't know, or they're not connected to, they have no relation to. But I've definitely been trying to communicate that this is like a really actually a very serious issue with democracy, the fact that climate activists are getting so harshly repressed. And then I think people have a much more close emotional connection to it when it's someone that, for example, like it's another snowboarder that's happening to. It's just much more easy for people to identify with it, I think. And I think that's definitely the main motivation for me to try to connect these two things much more, is that the media is portraying activists all the time, especially in the UK, as like crazy eco-zealots, eco-terrorists, and they're trying to portray them in a really bad light. And I just think it's much easier for people to connect with it when it's someone that they can identify with as part of their own community.
Yeah, one of the things that Protect Our Winter is the amazing nonprofit from the US that has chapters all around the world, pushes for is more advocacy and speaking out and using a platform to, leverage and have conversations with people and kind of make people aware of different things. At Athlete Climate Academy, we try and give people education so they can be fully informed when they want to speak out about this kind of stuff as well. And we encourage conversations, whether that's on the ski lift or the trail, because we think conversations can change the world. But then you are right that all that is leading up to a point where you're still talking about it. And you would hope that our representatives in the government would then, and I believe if the political winds are shifting enough, that they will then take action. But they've been around the world, been so reluctant to take big, bold decisions. I rave about Wales a lot because we've been a bit bolder when it comes to climate action. Our roads now we've taken down to 20 mile per hour. We're building a national forest. We've got a climate change commissioner as a future generation commissioner, and we've been pretty good, but nowhere near the actions that we should be taking. So what is the obvious next step after that? It's protest, and peaceful protest. And, as you say in your in one of your articles, that it's supposed to be annoying, and you're supposed to go out there and like frustrate people and get into the newspapers and things like that. So that kind of direct action is sometimes frustrating for people, but that's often the point, right? Is that we need to make people aware of what's going on. So what was your kind of first foray into direct action, and where has it led you since?
Yeah, I think for me, it really came to a bit of a head in 2021. It was actually during COP26 in Glasgow. I was doing talks around Norway to the ski community for POW, actually. And we were trying to promote this campaign where we were trying to get people to send the letters to their banks in Norway to get them to divest from investing in fossil fuel companies. And I just remember doing this talk where I was talking about if we were going to go past 2 degrees of warming, then like a billion people would face extreme heat stress. And I just remember, and then I went on to say that, the current policies at COP26 are leading us to 2.7 degrees of warming. And I just remember this really, like I was choked up in front of the crowd actually, and like I found it hard to carry on. And I just had this real sense that like I don't know if what I'm doing right now is enough. If I really try to emotionally connect with how bad things are, and I just think it's so easy for us to disassociate ourselves from actually how serious a situation we're in with the climate crisis. Like it's not. I think a lot of people, I mean, especially in the outdoor community, it's often, communicated like, yes, the glaciers are melting and there's less snow and this kind of thing. But I don't know, for me, I just had this real moment where I felt like I need to actually consider what this really means kind of for the future. And I just felt like I felt like I needed to do more. And I started to educate myself on social movements from the past and how social change has happened and how to create political change when you have such entrenched powers as the fossil fuel industry. And then I basically just kind of read up on different movements from the past and realized that it takes people to sacrifice. Often in the past, the biggest change has come when people have sacrificed their freedom, have protested until they've been put in prison, and been really, really annoying. I mean, I find it so interesting how if you walk around Parliament Square in London, there's statues of Nelson Mandela, of Gandhi, of Emily Pankhurst from the suffragettes, and they were doing literally the exact same thing as what people are doing today and getting completely hated for and put in prison for and arrested. I just think it's so interesting how we hold up these protest movements from the past as heroes, but don't seem to understand that like the things that people are doing today are literally exactly the same thing. So yeah, for me, it definitely came down to just figuring out a little bit that I wanted to do more. And I think also for me, an interesting part of maybe my background is my dad was very, very involved in the campaign to introduce like a right to roam legislation in Scotland.
Oh, really?
So he was kind of like one of the main architects of the legislation, and was and I think so for me, I grew up seeing political change like happen in front of my eyes kind of, and I think that has really impacted me because I remember my dad always telling me that the only reason that we're able to get right to roam in Scotland is because we have a devolved parliament, and we're not at the behest of the House of Lords, because in the UK any right to roam legislation would just get shut down by the House of Lords because it's full of landowners. And I remember him always making so clear that this is because of entrenched power. It's like, if you're a landowner, you can call up whatever political, whatever ministry you want and have dinner with them and get your point across. And as an ordinary person, you can't do that. And so we need to protest. We need to cause disruption. We need to get this issue into the media and make it a political conversation in order to make it like politically safe for politicians to introduce legislation like that would allow people to walk over anyone's land in Scotland. So I think for me that's really interesting, because then for when I came to Norway, for example, I just noticed almost immediately the incredible influence that Equinor has over Norwegian society, and how that it is just an entrenched power. And so I think that's a really interesting perspective that I got when I was growing up, because I don't think many people can actually see political change really happening. And I also saw like a lot of the sacrifices that my dad was making at the time during that campaign, and how much you had to kind of to actually give in order to push these kind of changes. It's not just about sending one petition and then everything's going to change. It's really like really, really hard work. So yeah, I think that's been very interesting for me to reflect over that.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit like that joke where one fish swims past another and says, "Oh, the water's really lovely today," and the other fish is like, "What water?" Because when you're in it, like you can very rarely see outside of it. So it takes those fish to pop their heads above the water to say, "Oh, we're actually in the water." And the same for politics. Like it's really difficult to be the fish that's popped their head out of the water to go, "Oh, this is something we need to change," or this, we need to do something about this, when everyone else doesn't even know that they're in the water to begin with. It's and it's difficult. And we were talking before about how difficult it is to be that kind of person who, especially if you are still trying to make a name for yourself as an athlete, or even if you just want to get a job, and it can be quite politicized sometimes, not because it's really a political issue, not that really this is a controversial issue, but it is a political issue a lot of the time. It can be difficult to poke your head above the water and go, "Hey, we need to do something about this." So when you got to Norway and started seeing the entrenched power of Equinor, and started to speak up against Rosebank, and getting yourself imprisoned, I think, or in jail at one point as well. You know, what was that journey like for you, and how do you then weigh up those two parts of your life where you say, "I really want to be an athlete, but I'm also this thing as well"?
Yeah, I have to say it's been quite difficult because I mean, a few years ago, I was really, really like all I wanted to do was go snowboarding, and I had plans to travel to different countries, and I mean that's what I was doing some years ago, and I definitely have had to go through a bit of a process to kind of understand what's important. So for me, it's definitely been a bit of a process to to feel like I can sacrifice maybe some things that I would have liked to have done for something else. But again, it just for me comes down to this whole thing about I just don't think that we're really emotionally connecting with like how serious the situation we're in. I was reading an article the other day which was about the Gulf Stream, basically, like the Gulf Stream, which is taking all the warm water to the UK, and how that there's like a 59% chance that it could collapse by 2050. I'm not sure if that's 100% right, but it was a real risk that this actually can collapse. And what that would mean is that the temperatures in the UK go down by 10 or 30 degrees, between 10 and 30 degrees, and that is so serious. And it's a little bit the same as like imagine if there was like a 10% chance, if you were getting on an airplane and the pilot was saying there's like a 10% chance that the plane could crash. I mean, it's just, you would be called a psychopath if you were getting on that plane. And I feel like we're a bit in the same situation, that I don't think we're truly emotionally connecting with how serious the situation we're in. So for me, that has just, it has led me to really try to reflect around what's important and what I want to spend my time on. And definitely more and more I see that like snowboarding has become maybe less of something that I'm really like completely focused on and pushing myself towards, and more something which has given me energy and able to it's a place that I just feel that I'm able to go to and relax and take my mind off things. And I also think that's really important, and I just really understand for me how important that is to have this thing that I can do which takes my mind off everything that's going on in the world. And especially when you're involved in quite intense and stressful actions. Like this summer I was involved in I broke into like an airport, like Oslo airport, and we sat down just close to the runway, and it was obviously like a really intense experience, and something which I didn't like take lightly at all. I would really didn't want to be doing that at all, but I just felt like it was a very important thing to do, and it got a lot of media attention in Norway, and got us onto the national news to talk about the entrenched power of Equinor and this kind of thing. So it was a good thing to do. But I definitely noticed the day after I came home and I went for a run in the mountains, and I just really felt this like the importance of being in nature and how like good it makes me feel. So for me, I think snowboarding and just being out in the mountains has become much more of a place that I go to take my mind off things. And I also think that's like I think it's a really interesting aspect of the outdoor community, because I noticed that so much I split my time, between the activist community and the outdoor community. And I noticed so much how in the activist community, a lot of people are living in cities. They're just completely focused on activism. Their minds are, 100%. And they're not able to really take a break. And I think that's actually a very important aspect of the outdoor community, is that we are a community of people that all do something we love with other people. And we have this space that we can go to, which makes us feel really good and takes our mind off things. And I think that's why I'm trying to push, to be honest, the outdoor community to be more active in, for example, direct action and protest movements around climate, because I think we are a community of people that are able to take on these big issues and put ourselves in stressful situations because we have the experience of doing that in the mountains, and because I think, are less susceptible to getting burnt out because we are able to disconnect also.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in what ways then do we think that athletes could be? Obviously, the first steps is getting educated, and next steps is doing some advocacy, whether that's online or in your community with friends, and within your running group, or within your local adventure group, those kind of things. So we'd be saying, and then also going out from there and speaking publicly about this kind of stuff. But one of the things you mentioned in your wonderful article, 5 Reasons Our Community Does Not Genuinely Engage, which we'll definitely link to because it's a really great read. You talk about soft denialism in climate denialism in it as well, which you just talked about. But that next step of we need the athlete community to start actually getting involved in direct action. Do you think that's the logical next steps, and where we need the athlete community to go?
I mean, that's definitely something that I'm pushing, because I just see how influential athletes actually are. And I think a lot of athletes maybe don't realize how influential they are. And I always say this to people that, organizations like Greenpeace, they don't have that many people who can push out their stuff on social media with, for example, 1 million followers, which, I know quite a few people who have like hundreds of thousands or 1 million followers on Instagram. And it's a really, really powerful tool. I mean, there's a reason that Elon Musk was buying Twitter, because he sees that it's such a powerful tool. So I think that I don't know if many athletes actually understand what a power they have in the influence. So, but the thing is that I also totally understand that not everyone is going to go out and get arrested. I'm like really privileged, and I'm in a position that I'm able to do that. And I think for me, it's like, it feels like the right thing to do. But I also totally understand that it's not for everyone. And that's, I think there's some athletes who potentially, and there is, I mean, I know quite a few athletes now who are doing the same. But what I do think is so important is especially athletes understanding that they could support people doing direct action in different ways, like by talking about the repression that activists are facing, for example. I think that's incredibly important, using their influence to actually highlight the repression that activists are facing, and also pushing different political campaigns. And I think that's definitely something which I feel is a bit missing in the outdoor community right now. I think there's a lot of focus on individual change, which I've said in articles and stuff before, which I think is it's important. But for me, I mean, an example is like, I saw that Wizz Air, the airline, has started a yearly subscription, like €500, and you can get however many flights you want in the year. And it's like I think it's like completely insane that is not something that we have for trains. Of course, we should have monthly, yearly subscriptions for train travel. And it's something that politicians could introduce tomorrow without even thinking about it. But it's just that the political will is not there. And so for me, it just feels much, much more important that especially athletes who have these big followings are pushing political campaigns that, for example, could introduce a yearly European rail travel pass or something like that. And I also think it's a bit demotivating for for individual people. I think there's only so much you can do in your normal life. I mean, for me, I live in Western Norway. The public transport is really bad here. I have a car that runs on diesel because it's just really hard to operate here without that. So I think it's important that we reflect a little bit around this. But I do also think it's really inspiring. For example, Killian's project right now, where he's like cycling through the Alps and climbing loads of 4,000-meter peaks. I really think there is also a space for just doing the sports that we're doing in different ways and more creative ways. I think that's also really inspiring. Also, people like, for example, Nikolai Schermer, the skier, he's trying to ski as impressively and at the same level as people that are using helicopters, but he's walking up the mountains and using an electric car to, go to the drive on his trips. And I think so there is like a real space for being more creative and doing our sports in a less destructive way, because they are obviously, massively impactful at the moment. But I do think the key thing is just like understanding and educating yourself in also the steps to create political change, because that's where the real impact and change is going to come from.
Yeah, it's one of those things that up until now we've kind of like unconsciously or subconsciously walked into a world where we've let especially fossil fuel companies become the dominant force, and we've become a little bit more woke to that now. We want to make sure that we have these conversations so that we have an opinion in where we want to see the next kind of 100 years going. And I think that opinion is we can take this crisis and we can find opportunities in it, like you say, in going ski touring in Aviemore, or cycling between mountains, or just making sure that instead of taking a helicopter to the top, you walk to the top. And that creates, not everyone can do that, some people might need it, but it creates more opportunity. And you might finding those kind of like that lemonade from lemons is a really good thing. I think we're going to start trying to do with the climate crisis is, right, how can we find the opportunities here to do something? So what are your kind of hopes for the future, if you have any at all? You seem like a hopeful person. Your hopes for the future and the relationship between like sports, environmental advocacy. Where would you like to see our community go next?
Yeah, it's funny. I think most kind of climate activists are actually, I mean, you can't not be hopeful, I don't think, and work with this stuff. I think it's funny because a lot of people think that, activists are just these like really grumpy, sad people, but actually, most people I know are really positive and really like, they're in this movement for because they believe in the future and they have hope. So I think it's really important. But yeah, for me, I really, the most important thing I think for me is just this educating ourselves more on this entrenched power of the fossil fuel industry, because I really think that is like the biggest barrier to change. I mean, first, the fossil fuel industry have been using the media and using politicians to deny that climate change was a thing. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, that was like the dominant thing. And, now they're using their influence to persuade us that they're the solution. We can keep on burning fossil fuels. We just need a bit of carbon capture. It's all going to be fine. And I just don't think people are massively educated in what goes on behind the scenes. Like how, I mean, an example I can give is, you know, Equinor, the state-owned oil company in Norway, they were taking out adverts in the Financial Times in the UK, and they ended up getting banned because the Financial Times, or the advertising agents in the UK, said this is not within our standards. And in Norway, like every newspaper is taking adverts from Equinor, and it's like so influential in terms of controlling the narrative in this country. Every time COP is happening in November, there's always these massive adverts that are taken out in every single newspaper, which says, this is why we need to keep on exploring for more oil and gas. And it's like, that is, me as a regular person does not have that power, to influence the narrative in that way. So, but I'm just not sure if many people, a lot of people here, they've just seen these adverts from Equinor their whole life. And so it's just a normal thing that they don't really think about. So I think big thing is really getting educated on entrenched power and how this is really holding us back, but also educating ourselves on how people have fought entrenched power in the past through direct action and protest. But I think also just I would really love to see the outdoor community just get maybe a bit more reflected on, what works and what doesn't work, and how can we do things better, and also how can we connect to other movements and maybe try to make just for us to be just more reflected around what we're doing and how we can do it better. I think there's I just see many people in the outdoor community, they sort of are doing the same things in terms of climate advocacy, and I think we can maybe take a few moments to reflect around whether we can support other movements in more ways, and maybe not be so scared to speak up about stuff. But of course that takes mentorship and education and people feeling comfortable. So I hope to see
having these conversations that give it time to reflect. It's really hard to reflect by yourself. So grabbing a beer or a burger in Poco Loco after a day out in the Alps and talking about the things that we do sub or unconsciously that we can then bring to the forefront and do consciously. If it's in a race, do we need plastic bottles, or can we just have a refill station? There's little things that we go but in the world not even thinking about. Oh, maybe we should think about that and see if it's the right thing to do. Maybe there's a good reason to have plastic bottles because it's a race and every second counts or something. But otherwise, hey, why don't we have a refill station instead? And being open and honest of those on those reflections, you can't have them unless you have conversations. And a good spark for that conversation, I think, and is your article in Looking Sideways. 5 reasons our community does not genuinely engage, and we'll link to that as well. Definitely, everyone should go and look at it. It's a great start. It's a great jumping off point to start having those conversations for sure.
Yeah, and I definitely think in terms of races and events and all of these different types of things that we do in the outdoor community, I think also just recognizing the power of those places, those events, recognizing that the kind of influence that they have is the same as the athletes with millions of followers. It's the events and things, they also have real power to influence things and create conversations, and that's how political change happens, is when there's a conversation in society. And so I think also organizers of these kind of events recognizing that there's maybe a space for conversations around climate at their events is also really important, and recognizing the kind of what's important for people to reflect over. I think that's also really key. like not being scared to have political conversations at, at events that you normally maybe wouldn't think is like the appropriate place. I think everything is political, and I think if people are saying that we shouldn't get political, it just means they're very privileged. I think everything is political, so I think definitely not having that fear of. I think a lot of people are scared to speak up about political stuff because they think that they're just going to get loads of hate and that it's not the appropriate place. But I would love to see more of the outdoor community feeling that it's appropriate to have a lot of political conversation in this community.
Yeah, I think you should start a new organization. It's Adopt a Protester, where the athlete community, the outdoor community can go and like support and adopt their own protester, and you get an update every month of what your protester's been doing. Would be wonderful. I'd adopt you, right?
I'm actually starting we're actually starting an organization which is going to be kind of like a mentorship place for outdoor athletes and things to get into like direct action and civil resistance. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see, because I think that's something that's like needed. I think a lot of athletes I speak to, they just don't even know where to start with getting involved in, let alone. I mean, I think like podcasts like this are so important, like for creating conversation around climate in the athlete community, and that's one thing. But I think like trying to mentor people and into actually doing direct action is like another thing. And so, that's something we're going to start and try to create a bit of like a movement in the outdoor community around direct action and protest.
Amazing. And when that comes out, definitely let us know, and we'll let our audience know as well where they can find that too. Calum Macintyre is a snowboarder and protester that sometimes goes to jail. Calum, thanks so much for being on our podcast, mate.
Thanks for having me.